what do you say to someone who's walking through the greatest pain of their life? There's really nothing you can say to make sense of it all. So stop trying. And I think the most helpful thing you can do, especially in the early seasons of loss and pain and tragedy, is just show up and stay with them until they're confident that God is going to be with them and that it's going to be okay. You cannot talk someone into being okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Amos, founder of The Redeemed. The Redeemed is a community of men who've come together to celebrate both life's difficulties as well as the triumphs over those difficulties. We're looking to build men in community with the opportunity for transformation in their lives, to realize they truly need other men in order to grow, to develop, to love, and to be the men that God has built us to be. Today we have a very special guest to have a very special topic in Daniel Brooker. And Daniel, welcome to the show and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, Paul, great to be here.
This is an opportunity to discuss a sensitive topic, to be honest with you. Daniel is a widower and has not only taken that on with a passion, but built an incredible ministry called Refuge, Widower Ministry. And so today we want to jump in and talk about that, but we also would love to get to know you just a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Excited to talk about it.
All right, Daniel, where did you grow up?
South Georgia, a little place called Sylvester. So my accent came with me. Don't live there anymore, but definitely a huge part of my story, my life, my DNA.
One of my very good friends, his dad was from Sylvester and Ty. So I know those two towns extremely well. He was an All-American at the University of Georgia playing football, went in as a kicker and came out as a linebacker. And so what a great little spot that is. I love going down to the Georgia coast and we drive right through there. It seems like it's a neat little place.
Yeah. So I've got one of my best friends in the world that still lives there. He's a farmer. And so my wife, the kids, they all love going down there, riding on the Ranger and, being out in the country and all of that. And so this was my world. This wasn't a vacation. This is my reality every day. But they look at it as like, wow, this is a whole different culture. So it's always good to go back down there and see family.
Yeah, there's something about being outside the big city.
Yeah.
Because you're in Atlanta now, correct?
That's right. The only place I said I would never live.
That's hilarious. Isn't that the way it works?
That's right.
So you and your wife have 6 kids. What is your favorite part about this season in life, having 6 kids together?
Well, one of the favorite things is the kids just love being outside. So it's just it can be as simple as going for a walk or a run in the neighborhood, going and playing out in the woods. They're in that season where everything is like, I want to go out in the woods, I want to go play in the creek, jump on the trampoline. So it's the simple things in life right now that have their attention and their heart. And if we can't meet them there, I feel like there's going to be a long road ahead. So we're trying to do our best as parents to be really intentional with that time and just to make sure that what we do and pour into them helps shape their future. But yeah, it's the best part is definitely just being outside with them and playing baseball in the backyard and all those fun things that you do as a kid, the core memories.
Okay, so if you and Brittany were to go and have a special vacation without any kids, no 6 kids, where would you go?
Wow. It's definitely kind of, I would say the mountains is our spot. Get away to North Georgia somewhere, where there's good food. You have to have access to good food. So there's the balance, right? Get away into nature, get close enough to where you can go to a good restaurant and go for a hike, go for a walk, relax a little bit. I think we're over, there's so many things happening in our home that you're overstimulated in some ways, right? All the questions and the noise and the chaos, that sometimes it's good to get a good fire going in the fireplace, sit back and relax a little bit and enjoy that. So that's definitely, I'm getting into my my old man kind of leave me alone for a little bit season,
I hear you.
Love people, love ministry, but sometimes you just got to get away a little bit and reset. And that's kind of where we are right now.
Well, I have always been of the theory that there are 2 types of people. There are water people and there are mountain people. And some people love one, some people love the other. And then I guess there are a few really rich people that live at Lake Tahoe and get both. And so, that's a whole different ball game out there where you get to look at and enjoy both at the same time.
Yeah.
So if I asked you to give me one word that would describe 2024 so far, what would it be?
Mm. Faith. Faith. I don't want to give a generic answer, but good gracious, God has invited us into a faith journey that requires complete trust in Him in a way that just we're saying, God, you get all the credit, you get all the glory, and we're going to give you the responsibility too, because we're stepping out into this season that you've called us to in this journey by faith, and we trust that you'll provide in ways that we can never provide in our own strength.
Wow. Well, that rolls right into my next question. So thank you. I'm glad to hear this is already a year of faith for you, but let's roll it back a little bit and ask, tell me a little bit about your faith journey. Tell me a little bit about how you came to God and a little bit about, obviously the trials that God has taken you through in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. That I had a fairly traditional upbringing. I was a preacher's kid and
Wow.
one of 8 kids. So I was right in the middle of 7 boys and 1 girl. And
Ooh, she
so,
had to have a rough life.
yeah, for sure. We didn't we ran off all the guys. I don't think she got married until she was about 30. So we did our best to keep them away for a while. So yeah, we definitely had just a wild, crazy upbringing in the sense of 7 boys and a girl, just terrorizing the neighborhood as best we could. But our journey was, where I grew up in Sylvester, it was almost, I wouldn't say expected to be a Christian, but it was certainly not out of the usual, in the Bible Belt to have this faith, especially as a preacher's kid. I mean, that was like, hey, you're obviously going to get saved, you're going to have a relationship with God, and you're going to do good things, be kind to people and that kind of thing. But my faith was never tested to an extreme in any way as a childhood. As a child, I just kind of moved through life with the basics in place and learning how to love God and love people. And along that journey, I met a girl. That's how most stories start, right? You meet a
For
girl and
sure.
everything changes. And so I met a girl at summer camp. Her name was Lyndsie, and she loved people really well. I'm talking about in a way that I never experienced before, and that was very attractive to me, even as a teenager. That she wasn't just popular because of whatever. It was because she made people feel so loved and seen and cared for. And
Wow.
so that began our relationship towards marriage. I was the goofy, kind of dorky homeschool kid. She was the popular kid, and it took a lot of years to convince her that it was a good idea to have a relationship. But I eventually did. I was very persistent
Yeah.
and was able to talk her into marrying me. And so we got married and pursued this life of, what's the American dream? 2 kids, a dog, a white picket fence, like all these things that you have in your mind of what a ideal story looks like. And so we pursued that and we got that. But in the background of this story was this journey that Lyndsie was walking through cancer. And so her
Mm.
journey kind of had this thread of cancer throughout it from the age of 19, being diagnosed with ovarian cancer for the first time. Then at 21, right when we were about to get engaged, we actually got engaged the day or 2 before her chemo started. And so during our year engagement, 7 months of that was chemo while I got things ready for our marriage. And
Wow.
then as she began to heal and began to kind of recover from all things chemo, we got married and then kind of got back on track because the doctor's like, hey, we got everything. It's good. You beat all the odds. Go live your life. Go adopt. And so we did. A couple of years into our marriage, we adopted 2 children, a boy and a girl. And we had a little dog. And all these things were kind of coming back together. So we're like, wow, that was a scary season. But thank goodness we got our dream back. Like this is what we've always wanted and always knew we'd get, and God gave this to us, and thank God, and let's keep moving forward. But several years after we adopted, cancer returned, and if you've had any experience with cancer, typically when it comes back, it's always more aggressive and scarier, and it seems to be more overwhelming. And that was certainly Lyndsie's journey, and our journey was the cancer came back with a vengeance. And so we found ourselves, just hanging on to anything we could, holding on to hope that God was going to heal, that God was going to make a way, even though the test all showed that this was not going to be good. And so I found myself as a 30-year-old man, the husband to Lyndsie, the father to 2 children, saying goodbye to the only girl I had ever loved. And this is my summer camp sweetheart. This was the girl that changed my perspective about God and people and how to live and how to love well. And here I am in an ER room having to whisper the things I never thought I would have to say to my wife. And it was in that moment that I experienced something that I'll never get over. And that was that in my most overwhelming and painful moment of saying goodbye to my 28-year-old wife, the mother to our 2 children, the love of my life, as I said goodbye, it wasn't as if she left me. It was as if heaven came down to that ER room to get her and carry her to heaven in a way that is hard to explain, but it was equally the most difficult season, a moment of my life, but it was also the most comforting and faith-confirming thing I've ever experienced, to the point where you have these seasoned doctors, ER doctors, and nurses all in the room weeping. And they share with me later that they had never experienced something like that in all of their time at the ER and all the tragedy they had seen. And so I walk out of that ER room and out of that hospital not recognizing anything about my life. Everything that I knew to be true was different. You know, I had to go home and tell my 2 children that mom's not coming home, and began this journey of God, like, I have to have you. There is no other options to get through this. There is no other way I'm going to be able to walk this journey that you've called me to on my own, in my own strength and in my own wisdom. And so I began to navigate that poorly, honestly. I began to try to figure out how to, logistically take care of 2 children, how to spiritually take care of 2 children. And the saving grace was that family and friends rallied around me like never before. It was as if we were all placed into the same room of grief, and we rallied. There was almost a comfort in it, honestly, a comfort in us all missing the same person, all grieving the same one that we loved, and saying we're going to commit to walking with each other through this, right, in a way that hopefully brings glory to God. But one of the things, as blessed as I was with the casseroles and the gift cards and the people trying to show up and awkwardly help, and even though they didn't know how to deal with grief in that capacity, they just said, we're just going to sit with you maybe. We're going to help with the kids. We're going to do everything we can in our power to help. And I didn't always make it easy on everybody. I was, grief is selfish in a lot of ways. Pain is selfish. And so you think that your pain is front and center. It takes priority over everything else. You're thinking that, hey, my pain's bad. This was my favorite person in the world that I chose. Mine's bad. Like, it takes rank, if you will. And so sometimes you believe this lie that your pain matters more than everyone else's. And so I just remember being in that season, grateful for who stepped into my story, but also wishing that a widower, someone who knew exactly what I was going through, someone that was similar to my season in life, who lost his wife, would just show up and help guide me through. And they didn't. And it always bugged me. It always just kind of just stepped on a nerve that, hey, I know there's a widower out there who has heard my story. I know someone has been where I've been, clearly, and yet they've chosen, for whatever reason, to not step into my story. And I never knew who it was, never got a name, never, confirmed someone heard and chose not to step into, but I always had this just grudge, if you will, or this gripe with God, that God, why didn't they show up for me in that way? I had an amazing community, but not a single guide to help me navigate this grief. And it wasn't until 2 years later when I remarried. So I remarried to a widow. Her name is Brittany. She entered the season of grief within a month of me becoming a widower. And her husband, young husband as well, passed away instantly, unexpectedly. And so she entered grief. I entered grief. She had 3 young boys. They're all under 3 when her husband passed away. I had two small kids, that were goodness under 4 when Lyndsie passed away. And so 2 years later, we married and began a journey together, because the most attractive thing about Brittany was that it was really where she was going. It wasn't just her character, it wasn't the way she looked, it wasn't the way she parented, but it was her eyes set and fixed on eternity that was incredibly attractive to me. And it became something that we united on, not because of where we had been, but because of where we were going. And so we married, and it was actually a few weeks after we got married that at a conference of all things that Brittany was speaking at, I actually didn't even meet. I ran across a widower. His name is Davey Blackburn. He runs a ministry called Nothing is Wasted Ministries. And so crossed paths at the retreat, at the conference, and then connected through social media a few weeks later. And then he was in our home, I guess within a month of that, in our first conversation. So my first conversation with a widower, I was able to sit down with Davey, I think it was for 5 hours, sat around our kitchen island and just had all these Me Too conversations, right? Like, oh, I'm not the only one. You felt that, you experienced that, just all the conversations that you really can't have with anyone that doesn't understand your journey in a really intimate way. And so after that conversation, I told my wife, Brittany, I said, I can't believe that this doesn't happen more. I can't believe that widowers don't show up for each other. And this is so awful. I mean, there was so much encouragement in that one conversation that it just left me wanting this for other widowers, and realizing how much it I would say held back, but how much it affected me by not having that relationship. So a few weeks forward, Brittany had served at a widow retreat in the area, and we were having a date, and I was just asking her, hey, tell me what y'all did at this retreat, and did y'all just sit around crying the whole time? What did y'all do? She's like, actually, it was a lot of fun, and we had a great time, and there's an amazing community, and we did this and this and this. I'm like, man, I would have given anything for a community like that, especially the first year of grief. That would have been so helpful to have someone say, hey, man, come on over. We've got a place for you at the table. There's guys that are further down the road than you are, that love Jesus, that love their kids, that would love to encourage you. And yet that was not the case. So she said, well, maybe there's something out there you don't know about. Let's just Google it. So we're on a date night, Googling, widower ministry, faith-based, Jesus-centered, gospel-centered, Jesus-loving ministries for widowers, and all these words, and nothing showed up, nothing. And I remember sitting there kind of discouraged, like, man, what I thought to be true is true. There's just nothing out there. And so Brittany asked me the question that really changed everything. She said, now that you know there's nothing out there for widowers, what are you going to do about it?
Wow.
And so my initial response was not very Christ-like. I said, I'm just going to keep complaining. I'm just going to, it's not out there. Someone needs to be upset about this. And what she was asking me to do was, instead of complaining, actually respond, do something with this awareness that God had given me. And so that began the journey. Over that season, God began to, one by one, piece by piece, bring people into my life that, even though I didn't realize it in the moment, were people that were going to be with me even now in this journey. So widowers started showing up as our story began to spread and reach other people. People that loved Jesus stepped in, and all of these people that I called dear, dear friends and mentors began to assemble in a way that I could not take credit for, in a way that I had no control over, but God was just gifting me with these relationships. And so I began to see the value of all these people around me, and I began to invite them and said, hey guys, I don't know what God is going to do with this, but I cannot sit back and let other guys go through this without community. Would you be willing to help me host some type of in-person retreat, event of some kind, and just get the word out? Let guys out there know, widowers with children in the home, know that there is a place for them. And so they, in spite of the fact that there was no social media content, there was no hype videos, there was no website, there was nothing to say, here's what it looks like, here's what it feels like, we're not weirdos, we're okay, we're cool. There was nothing out there other than an open invitation that we are we're creating a space because God has called us to for widowers with children in the home. And the first year that we hosted this, we had guys come from all over the country, even from Canada. So we had Canada, California, Texas, Florida, all over the country. I think there was 12, 13 different states represented in just the
Wow.
first invitation. And so I asked the guys when they got there, like, are you crazy? Why did you show up to this place with no awareness of what's going on, like no real agenda, no curriculum? And they just said, we've been doing this on our own long enough to realize we can't continue to do this well alone. We have to have somebody in our corner. We have to have somebody point us to Jesus. And it was worth the risk of going out on a limb and going to this place with the hope of finding encouragement and community. And even though the agenda was not, we didn't know what we were doing, what we found out at the end of this, that God was fully in control and that he was doing things that we can never take credit for along this journey. And we just decided as a team, a small core team of guys, hey, we've got to keep offering this. We've got to create this, seats at the table to make sure these widowers have a place that they can step into, that they don't feel like the outcast and the oddball and all of these things that I felt all the way through. And so it began that journey. That was 5 years ago when we launched that. And now we're not only reaching guys in the States, but really all over the world. We have missionaries that have come from Africa after their wife passed away from malaria. We've had missionaries come from Ireland after being there for 30 years. And having going through the battle of cancer. We've had guys in most of the states attend these retreats, and they all have the same common commitment, and that is to not waste the pain that they've been given. And so what that means for them is not being the same in their walk with the Lord or not becoming worse in their walk with the Lord and in their life. They're like, we don't want to become bitter. We don't want to become this person that strays from our faith or who derails, and our kids watch. Our kids see this and decide, hey, if dad's faith didn't change his perspective on this journey, then why am I pursuing a faith? We realize that even though this ministry is for widowers, it's actually a generational ministry because these guys are the best example and the most clear example of what faith looks like under trial. And so their children are walking this. Again, all these guys have children in the home with very few exceptions, children in the home, and their children are seeing dad live out his faith in the most vital season that they've ever experienced. And so we strive to impact generations because there's so many studies. I'm sure you know this probably even better than I do, Paul, but the way that a dad leads his home impacts generations to come. Either they're blessed by it or they have to recover from it. And so we've launched this ministry with a desire of knowing the importance of a father in their home and realizing that as well as a church, our church takes care of widows, and they should. Brittany has been blessed by the widow ministry in our community. As well as that is, there needs to be more communities for widowers as well, because we just say, we're good, we're fine, thanks for asking, we're whatever. And in reality, we're absolutely drowning. We're absolutely off the rails, and we're just not willing to let people in when they ask casually. So all of that to say is it's been a gift to me and my family. It's been a gift to the guys that serve to remind these guys of the hope of heaven and to be able to say, you are going to make it, but I'm not just going to tell you that. I'm not even going to tell you that at all. I'm not going to tell you that you're going to be okay. I would rather stay with you until you can say it yourself.
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for that incredible journey that you just shared with us. I was pondering in my own head as you were talking, what adjective to use that describes both the positive and the negative of what you've been through. And I don't know that I can formulate that accurately at this time, but I would just say it seems you've had both a heartbreaking as well as an absolutely miraculous journey along the way. And, I'm so sorry for your loss of Lyndsie. I'm so sorry for what you went through. And I can only imagine becoming a single father, a widower, what it must be like to go home and have that conversation with your kids. And then not just to have that conversation, but then that's the beginning, not the end.
Right.
To walk it out for, a period of what you said was a couple of years before you and Brittany came together. And so, I just admire the heck out of you. And I think so much of the fact that you would then turn that toward an inspiration into helping other men, even if you bucked a little bit at that dinner, your willingness to step into what God needed. I mean, clearly he had a plan for you and for your life and for what was happening. And I'm just curious, as you look back and reflect on all that, and as hard and as deep as those wounds must be, what is it like now to think about the place he's put you in and the impact you're having on all of these other men who are attending your conferences for the last 5 years?
Well, thank you for the encouragement. It's a journey. I think if anybody who has a story, unless you have that story and share it, you don't realize there's an emotional cost to going back and sharing that story. And you may say, well, Daniel, why do you share the most painful thing that's ever happened in your life? It's because the gift to bear the name of Jesus is worth all of that. The gift to point people to the hope of heaven and to the only answer we have, that is Jesus, is worth any cost associated with reliving that experience. And it's not that, and it's a part of your story. You don't have to be reminded of it. It's part of your journey. And so what I would say is that what I've learned through this is that if you're willing to not waste what you've been through, God will bring purpose out of it in a way that you can no longer keep it to yourself. If you've experienced the salvation and the hope and the grace that God gives, and only he can give, how can you keep something that good to yourself? How can you be that selfish in some sense, right? And so that's been what's come out of this is I can no longer keep this good news to myself. I can no longer sit back silently while people believe lies. Guys, especially in my shoes, believe the lie that they're the only one who's felt this, that their kids will be destroyed and their kids will not have successful lives moving forward. No, that's not true. By the grace of God, there is hope ahead, but it does require faithful steps forward. And I want to not just tell them which steps they are, but walk with them and show them, here's some things that you can do that will help you be prepared for what God's calling you to.
Wow. Well, I can tell you that my journey and yours are different in that mine was self-inflicted and yours was God's choice for your life. And, I took the longest time to get through shame and the longest time to get through the difficulties of some of those decisions before I was capable of sharing my story and beginning this ministry and trying to do things for the betterment of people. But I agree with you 100% that God has put us in a place that with the journey we've been through, that he's going to utilize that for his kingdom and for his good. And I just feel honored, as it sounds like you do, that he has chosen me to be somebody who gets to go out and actually share their story. And despite the choices that I made, that I'm trying my best to help men prevent doing the things that I did.
Yeah, and make no mistake about it, God will encourage his people. He will make that known. So he'll find somebody who's willing to speak the truth. And so for you and me, we've been invited to help represent God in that way, right? We've been invited to remind others of hope. But I don't think for a minute that he can only use me. He's got plenty of other people out there, but I feel honored and just absolutely excited that he has invited me into this story to help encourage others in a real practical way, right?
Yeah. Well, you shared that incredible story of the emergency room and what happened to the doctors, the nurses, the personnel, and of course, most importantly, to you. I'm curious, though, in your multi-year journey after that, did you have a period where it started to interfere with your relationship with God? Did you have doubts and thoughts? I mean, I would imagine for a lot of men who come through the journey you've been through, that faith doesn't always what guides them the entire time. Right. And so or maybe you can talk about in your own experience with other people that have gone through this. I'm just thinking about our listeners and those who may be hearing this and going, that's not my experience. My experience was I hated God, or I turned against God, or I, didn't think God was with me. Cause I mean, my sister lost her husband this past summer, and she is certainly still in faith, but she's hurting. And I
Yeah.
mean, it is, as a widow, she is struggling with the pain. And I probably share more than I should on her behalf, but I want her to get to the place where she has the freedom that you feel now. And I think she's probably getting there, but I don't think it's without difficulty.
I mean, you're exactly right. I'm actually more concerned for the people that right out of the gate say, hey, you know what, I completely and fully trust God through it all. This is the most devastating thing I've ever walked through, but God's got this, and I'm just not going to worry. If you're saying that, you're either of incredible faith or you're just lying. I mean, the wrestling with God is absolutely, I believe, healthy. It's necessary for someone you love. So, put into place any relationship that's significant to you, right? Even though you love them, there's moments where you don't agree and you don't like what's coming out of that relationship. And it's healthy to say that instead of saying, all right, I hate it, but I don't feel free to say that. It's not reverent. God knows our heart anyways. He knows the thoughts that we have. He knows the fears. So why not say those things out loud to him? Say, God, I am struggling. I don't know why you've called me to this, why you have invited me into this story, but I don't feel equipped. I don't feel capable. I don't feel ready for this, and I need you to be close. I think that's why Scripture does say God is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. But you almost have to admit that and acknowledge that before there's actually that nearness. And I think for me, what happened, and actually it happened really early on. So because Lyndsie had cancer for so many years, and especially the last 8 months were brutal. Doctor visits, hospital stays, radiation, ER, ambulance rides, all these horrible things, traumatic things. I found myself after Lyndsie went home to heaven just extremely physically sick. Like I shut down because I had been sleeping in hospital couches for months. I had not slept, and it was so strenuous that only God could have held me together in that. There's no physical strength that could have sustained all of that was going on as a caregiver. And I want to deviate just a second, squirrel moment here, to say that anybody who has been a caregiver for someone they love, like, you are seen, and I know how you feel. I know how exhausting it is, and I know how just taxing it is on your faith and on your body, and that if you're walking through that or have walked through that, you need to give yourself time to heal. You need to be able to say, hey, I want to raise a hand. I need some breathing room here to get back to healthy. I need to be able to process some of the stuff. And so with that being said, that was my journey. I just physically shut down, lost a lot of weight, got sick. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't the flu. It was just grief. And about 30 days into this journey, I wouldn't even sleep in a bed. I just slept on the couch because that bed was too much of a reminder that my wife wasn't there. And so I remember my friends and family saying, hey, Daniel, we're getting worried about you. You've been on the couch for the last month. We need you to kind of get back out. We need you to get back at least moving a little bit, take a couple of steps. And one of the things they invited me to was a concert, of all things. And I'm like, really? A concert? I don't feel like going to any concert. And it was a worship concert. And so they kind of dragged me there. I didn't really want to go, but I'm like, all right, it probably is a good idea. And I sat on the very back last row in the upper deck. I mean, as far away as I could get from the worship. And I remember that first 30 days, even though I talked to God, I didn't worship at all. I just was like, God, I miss Lyndsie. I miss the connection. I'd even gotten as far as calling her number out of habit a couple weeks after the funeral, and it rang and my heart just sank. I almost dropped my phone because I was so used to talking to her, used to being part of her life and part of my life, that I just realized I've just called my wife, who's no longer here. And so that connection was something I missed so badly. And I realized in the middle of worship, even though my hands are probably in my pockets for most of the time, I remember God speaking to my heart. And this is, you're speaking to grew up a Baptist boy where it's just facts and that's it. Like God's speaking only through his word and that kind of thing. But I remember God speaking to my heart and kind of just encouraged me by saying, that connection you desire with Lyndsie, you have that through me. She is worshiping me right now. So what are you doing? And so I realized for the first time that worship is what connects me with my loved one, with Lyndsie in heaven. She's actively and continuously worshiping God in heaven. And the most similar thing I can do to her, the most connecting thing I can do with Lyndsie is to worship God and to worship Him with my heart. And that shifted me from just missing Lyndsie and complaining to God to saying, God, if she is worshiping you right now, help my heart to worship you too. Help my actions to worship you moving forward. And even though that did not solve everything, it shifted my heart from complaint to saying, God, I give you control of this. I know that you're in control, and I want to acknowledge that through my worship even now.
Wow. I cannot imagine being thrust into that position to have to go and put on a face and to attend an event that soon after such an incredible loss. While God may have worked it out for you and He may have spoken to you and He may have done all those things that make it easy now, in that moment, it had to be hard to put on a face and pick up and go. Those are God-led circumstances for sure.
Hmm.
And so I appreciate you sharing that story. You know,
Yeah.
one of the things that we always love to do on this podcast is to talk about to an individual, what does redemption mean to you? And it seems like that you've had an incredible and wonderful redemptive story. And I'm just curious, because we're the redeemed, if you just for a moment share what redemption means to you.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's an incredible question. I'm learning that, I'm learning two things. Redemption is not people. Sometimes we associate when we lose somebody, whether it's a relationship or it's death or it's whatever, redemption does not hinge on that person staying away or coming back or stepping into your life. If I had hinged my redemption on Brittany, remarrying to a widow and saying, Brittany, you're my redemption. You are literally, it all falls on you. We're not equipped to handle that weight. We're not designed to get that glory or that honor. Only God is. And so the redemption, although it was part of my situation changing, the redemption was God becoming real to me in a way that I never experienced before. If you go through tragic situations and your faith is not affected by that, and you say, God, hey, I clearly can trust you, even when it doesn't make sense, even when I don't see the big picture, I can trust you no matter what. The cost is worth it if I get you at the end of this. I believe that is redemption, not who steps into your life. God can bless you, and He certainly does. He blesses you with relationship. He blesses you with love and with nearness and community. But the community, the person, the love is not your redemption. It's Jesus basically becoming who He's always been in your life. So He's always been good. He's always been in control, and us finally coming to the place where we understand and actually say, God, I know it. You are good. You are above all of this. You're not only good when my circumstances are good. You're not bad when my circumstances are bad. You're in my pain, but somehow you're still above it. Does that make sense? I think that was the realization that God is in our pain and close, but He's above it. He's not affected by it. He's not less good or more good based on what we're going through.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's always wonderful to hear people's own personal interpretation of what redemption means, knowing that it all comes through God and it all comes before us. For me personally, I never understood that God redeemed me ahead of the choices I'd made and the things that I'd done. And so it was a beautiful thing to open up the book of Isaiah and to see God's description of how He truly loves us and what He's done for us ahead of us. And so I agree with you. It's not about another person, but it's about that relationship with Him. And that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So as I was doing and talking with people about your website, I saw an interesting quote. Don't tell someone it's going to be okay. Stay with them until they can say it. And I'm curious if you would mind giving me just a little bit of insight into what that means to you. Clearly, I can assume the strength of that statement and the strength of standing by someone. But from your perspective, tell me a little bit about not only letting somebody, not saying it to somebody, but standing by them until they can say it themselves.
Yeah, that was born out of a season of people being really scared to say something because they would say the wrong thing. So you had some people, a group of people that honestly just kind of disappeared because they did not know what to say, and it scared them that they were going to put their foot in their mouth and just like mess it all up. So they kind of just pulled back. And no issue with them. That was a natural reaction of fear, and I can understand that. And then there was another group that just said the first thing that came out of their mouth, and it was almost always not good. Can you imagine being that
Not
literally
funny, but I'm laughing. I
oh, it is.
apologize.
And I remember even at the funeral, people saying things that I mean, heaven got another angel, and God only calls his favorite ones home early, and like all these things. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, I don't need to hear any of that. Like, that's not helpful. That's not encouraging. And I begin to realize that, whether it was nothing being said and that hurtful or someone saying the wrong thing, really there is no, I mean, what do you say to someone who's walking through the greatest pain of their life? There's really nothing you can say to make sense of it all. So stop trying. And I think the most helpful thing you can do, especially in the early seasons of loss and pain and tragedy, is just show up and stay with them until they're confident that God is going to be with them and that it's going to be okay. You cannot talk someone into being okay, but you can certainly stay with them until they can say it. I don't remember what people said other than the really bad things, right? But I remember how people showed up and how it made me feel to know that there's someone sitting right next to me. They're not even talking, they're not trying to fix it. They're just going to stay with me and be available in case I need something along the way. There'll be a time for encouragement in the word. There'll be a time for sending verses and scriptures and sermons. There's a time for all of that. But initially, you just need to show up for someone and then let them guide you on what the time frame needs to look like. And that's what they did so well. People that are still with me in my seasons showed up. I'll never forget this. The first phone call I made after Lyndsie went home to heaven, it was to my best friend. His name is Jason. And I couldn't get out the words. I called him. He was about an hour away, and I couldn't even tell him what had happened. All I could do was just sit there silently, tears pouring down my face. And he knew what that call meant. And so he said, I'll be right there. An hour away, he was there in probably 35, 40 minutes. I don't know how he got there that quickly, but he showed up and gave me a bear hug of all ages. And he stayed with me even now, almost 9 years later. He's still in my corner daily. And so those are the things that make a difference is when you can't even get the words out. When I couldn't even say what I was feeling, he certainly couldn't say what he was feeling, but he just sat with me in it. And I think there's so much value to that. If you have that opportunity and that access to someone, please do so. It can change everything about their story.
Wow, that's amazing. What a friend. I mean,
Yeah.
we all
Yeah.
need that in those dark moments. And sometimes if you don't feel like you have that, I mean, that's really why we do what we do here at the Redeemed is community. It is the
Yeah.
realization that you need that bear hug, that you
That's
need
right.
that person who's going to show up, not just one day, but 9 years later, every
Yeah.
day. And, you know, I went through life with some friends and a lot of friends that were news, sports, and weather, but it's been a blessing in these last few years of my life that I've developed some friendships that have such depth and meaning and ability to go through life's difficulties and trials together. And I'm glad you had that in your friend, and I'm glad that he was there for you. That's a wonderful thing to hear.
Yeah. I'm very rich in friendships. God has been very gracious to bring that in. And I've realized in my many flaws and many faults, there's no perfection in me. But as I've um, as I've responded to God's calling on my life, He's equipped me by bringing people alongside me. So especially in my attempted obedience is where I've seen the most dear and significant friendships show up, and God's been gracious in that way.
All right, I'm going to ask a tough question, and I hope it's okay.
Sure.
But, you know, you've loved, it sounds like, two women in your life, in Lyndsie and in Brittany. And I'm
Yeah.
curious how God holds that heart space for you,
Mm.
because having the love of your life, as you described her earlier in the conversation in Lyndsie, but also truly loving this woman in Brittany. I know what it's like to have multiple children. I have 4. So I know what it's like to love people differently and to love them the same. Just talk to me for a moment about the love in your heart. And so you must be so full and filled to know you had the love of your life, but you also have this woman that you truly love now. And maybe you can just describe for someone who's not a widower, who hasn't been through this experience, what that's like.
Yeah, that's wow. That's real. That's a real question, because if you look at the stats, and there's different studies out there, but typically second marriages have twice as high of a divorce rate as a traditional first marriage. That's already at 50%, right? Typically, or thereabouts. But then you enter a second marriage, the layers that come with that, and honestly, the comparison that can creep in when you've chosen 2 people. I mean, a marriage is so unique in that relationship that you've chosen to fully trust and fully do life with 2 different people or with somebody. And so for remarriage, it can easily become a comparison game, a comparison trap. And I'm definitely guilty of that. I think everybody who's honest would say that there's been some type of comparison. And while Lyndsie and Brittany didn't look alike, and their personalities are totally different, that there's no comparing. Well, they both had this color. They even had different color hair, all this stuff. What I realized is that, in remarriage, something happens, especially if we're talking about grief and a loss. So loving Lyndsie right now looks like honoring her life, and loving Brittany looks like actively pursuing her heart. And what that can look like,
Beautiful.
probably the best way I like things in simple terms. Maybe this will help explain it a little bit better. In remarriage, you have this idea of that there's 2 different people running this race. For me, my first wife, Lyndsie, was running this race. People are cheering her on, this race of life. Hebrews talks about this great race. It gives this picture of you're being surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses and all this stuff, right? And so for Lyndsie, she was running a race, and now and Brittany is as well. But it's not as side by side. It's not first place, second place kind of race. It's a relay race. And so the way I look at it that helps me understand this gift that God's given me twice now in marriage is that Lyndsie ran an amazing race, a race of honor and integrity and of character, as long as God allowed her to. And because of death, that baton was dropped on the track with a lot of people watching, with a lot of people in the stands aware of what had happened. And while that was such an honor to see her run her race and to love her through that, Brittany steps onto the track after this baton has been dropped with everybody in the stands watching, and she has the courage to pick it up and continue running a race, knowing that some people will always remember Lyndsie, and some people will, in their flaws and in their flesh will compare in some ways. But my heart is to cheer Brittany on because she's continuing a race that Lyndsie started, and that they both, because of heaven, get to celebrate this finish line together, not on a first and second place status, but on we were able to run a race of honor that God called us to. So it's not a race head to head. It is a relay race that God has invited us to. And so you can't compare their running styles. You can't compare their speed. You compare, like, God, you've called them and they're running faithfully in the lane that you've called them to, and they're honoring. Brittany has honored Lyndsie better than anyone I can imagine. She is Lyndsie's storyteller to our children. When the kids have a story, a question about Lyndsie, well, Brittany's there to answer it. And so she's her storyteller, greatest cheerleader. And all of this has got to point back to Jesus. So whenever we talk about Lyndsie, or whenever we talk about her late husband, Patrick, while we share the details the kids are asking, we always try to point their hearts to Jesus, to heaven, to the place where we will be reunited one day. And I told Brittany, I said, I do not want to show up to heaven empty-handed. I want all of our children to be there with us, and I want to make sure that we do everything possible to point their hearts to Jesus, not just to Lyndsie or Patrick along the way.
Daniel, not only your words beautiful, but your cadence, your tone, you talk in a way that is just full of compassion and love. And I just can only imagine for the people that come to your conferences, the soothing nature that you provide them. I mean, seriously, my friend, you're a star, and it is amazing to hear you do it the way you do it. I just can imagine myself still struggling with some bitterness and some contempt and some other feelings. And yet you speak so eloquently. I mean, the baton analogy, anybody can understand, especially as a former track guy and me. And I may not look like it anymore, but I was at one point. And so, that's just, that is so special. And I'm so appreciate it. So at this point, I really want to round out our time here today, because that was just so poignant, and round it out with an opportunity, because our audience loves to get advice. And they say that, often they want to hear from an expert like yourself. What's the best piece of advice you would give them if they're going through a circumstance, if they're stepping into this? And then also, I want to make sure that people know how to connect with you. So would you just for a moment talk about the advice, and then talk about how to connect with you, how to get onto your website, and how to connect, in one form or another?
Absolutely. I think the advice that I wish I had heard when I became a widower, or just stepping into pain. So for anyone out there who is impacted by pain, I'm talking about significant life-changing pain, I think you need to be aware, first of all, that this pain puts you in the same room as so many people that you love, people that love you and are affected by this in a similar way. And there's a comforting element to being placed into the same pain together. But the temptation in that room is, when you leave, you assume that your time of time that you leave that room, the time that you re-enter life and you re-enter a normal pace of your journey, you assume that that's the right time, that anybody that leaves before you or after you is incorrect, and they're not doing it well. And there's a tendency and a temptation to judge people, to say, for me, hey, you must not have loved them as much as me, or maybe you're not processing it. And there's just a title we try to put on people that clearly I'm doing the right thing. You must not be. You're rushing it, or you're sitting on it. You're not doing anything. You're just sitting in your pain. Don't do that to the people around you, the people that surrounded you in your most difficult season. I would say give them grace and ask for the same grace. You probably never experienced this pain before, so you don't know what you're doing. They probably don't know what they're doing either, to some extent. So give each other the grace to say, we're going to walk this together. We're going to commit to being good for each other. And even when we don't understand each other's actions, even when we don't agree with the pace and with the process that you choose, we are going to love above that. So as I stepped out of intense grief and pursued healing and pursued remarriage, and this new season, I don't need to look back and say, you're still in the room. What's wrong with you? Or you left it before me? Are you crazy? We should never allow our hearts to judge someone's pace and assume that we're right in that process. And so there's many other things I've learned along the way, but if you get that one right, if you get the grace part right and realize you're not the expert, you've probably never been here, or you're not doing everything right, give them the same grace that you would require in that season, and watch God heal, watch God protect those relationships that you've had before, and just love them where they are along the way. Let God help them process what they're feeling. Allow counselors and licensed and people that know what they're doing to walk them through that. You just be their friend. You be loving towards them. Don't cast stones. Don't be critical, and certainly don't try to get people to agree with your perspective. Just love and pray for them where they are, and ask for that same in return. That's the advice I would have given myself back in ground zero, right? So that's the heart behind it. And the second part of your question, how to connect. We've got Instagram. It's probably the most frequently visited place where people can find content on what we do. It's Refuge Widowers is the handle for that. And then we also have a website, refugewidowers.com.
Wonderful. Well, this has been a powerful and wonderful time. And for our audience, I would say 90% of you, this is a card to put in your wallet. This is a memory to have, so that if and when you face this circumstance, people like Daniel can come into your lives in a way that he didn't have for his personal self, the opportunity to have someone who would come in, lead with a ministry, lead biblically, lead especially for men who have children at home. And so we're so thankful that Daniel took charge of this and began to lead this ministry and do it in a way that is spirit-led and spirit-filled. God, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much for leading us through this today. And we just thank you for Daniel and for his family. We thank you for Brittany and for all of their children. And God, I just ask you to bless our time today and bless all of our listeners. To our listeners, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule today, for coming on board and listening and hearing this. And I hope it's been as impactful to you as it has been to us. Continue to check out all the stuff that's happening on our website. Sign up for our email, because that's the best way to stay in tune with what's happening at the Redeemed. And we just wish you the very best. God bless and Godspeed.